What is up, everybody? I am your host, Katie Gonzalez, and you are listening to What the Psychology. I wanted to first start off this episode 1, and I wanted to say how thankful I am of you guys. The moment I started talking about doing this podcast and making the page and posting things about it, I have had so many friends and family just reach out to me or share my page and get hyped up about what I'm doing. And I am just so overwhelmed by the amount of support that I have received. So I just want to say thank you guys. You guys are amazing. I am super grateful. I love you. And welcome to the What the Psychology family. I'm so glad you're on this journey with me. And so let's just hop into this. I wanted to first start off by asking you a question. What are you afraid of? Yeah, think about that. Is it spiders and creepy crawling things? Rats? What about snakes? Are you afraid of clowns? Maybe small spaces? Tall spaces? Who knows? Let me know. Because today we're going to talk about phobias. Alright, so I'm going to start off with a statistic here. 70% of the US population report having a phobia of some sort, or in other words, an irrational fear to something. Now, I will let you know that I do have a phobia, and I'm going to share a story later about this. So don't feel like you're alone. Now, I do want you to know a few things before we really dive into this. The first thing is that phobias are under the anxiety disorder umbrella. Now, anxiety is characterized by distress, persistent anxiety, or maladaptive behaviors that reduce anxiety. So, what exactly does that mean? What is maladaptive? Let me explain. In simple terms, maladaptive is an interference, usually like an interference with your life. So, in this definition, when it says maladaptive behaviors that reduce anxiety, it's pretty much a behavior that causes you to stop you from adapting to new or different circumstances. And we'll go a little bit more into detail about what that can mean. It is important to know that, like phobias and many other type of disorders or conditions, you won't actually get diagnosed by a doctor unless you are showing maladaptive behaviors. So like if that condition is heavily interfering with your life. So we'll go over maladaptive a little bit. You'll see what I mean when I start to dive into these different type of phobias. So just keep that in the back of your head. Now, there are 3 types of phobias. There's specific phobia, social anxiety disorder, or social phobia, and agoraphobia. The first one is specific phobia, which is probably the most widely known. This is like what I started the podcast with. I started listing animals, insects, those type of things. So a specific phobia is marked by persistent irrational fear and avoidance of a specific object, activity, or situation. Now, the word avoidance can be maladaptive, meaning you're changing your behavior to reduce that anxiety. So if you avoid what you're afraid of, if you're afraid of snakes, you try not to go near where any snakes would be. Those kind of things. But like I said, maladaptive is more of like if it's heavily influencing your life. People with phobias, they feel extreme fear when something triggers the phobia. Like I said, it could be heights, snakes, closed spaces, a range of other possibilities. I have a little side story for this part. I graduated high school in the year of 2013. I know not too long ago, maybe some of you making you feel older, maybe some of you are making you feel really young. Who knows? But yes, I graduated high school in 2013, and especially when we were seniors, we would have signs at pep rallies, and it had this long word saying Chiskadicophobia. Now, Chiskadicophobia is a fear of the number 13. So we kind of used this word to say to the other lower classes in high school, like, we're the best. be afraid of us because we're the class of 13, fear us, those kind of things. So kind of silly, but that's just like a little fun side story to kind of go along with a phobia that is a little bit different. Now, when people come across their phobia, there are different symptoms. First thing is their feelings. So maybe they have a fear of dying, losing control, fainting, having a sense of being detached from their body. There are also physical symptoms. There's unsteadiness, lightheadedness, dizziness, choking sensation, pounding heart or fast heartbeat, kind of like as if you were walking through a haunted house. Chest pain or tightness, sweating, hot or cold flashes, shortness of breath, nausea, tingling, trembling. So this is pretty much the body's fight or flight system in the works. Your body is trying to fight off and respond to anxieties. Your body wants to heighten your awareness of whatever there's danger present so that you respond in the appropriate way. So now I gave you a figure earlier. I said 70% of the population claim to have some sort of phobia. Now about 12% of the US population are actually diagnosed with a phobia. And this means that it's maladaptive, meaning it's so severe that it interferes with their life. Another cool little fact is that phobias are actually more common in women. So men will give you a point here. We'll make throughout this podcast a fun little competition. But don't worry, you're not off the hook. There are other disorders and conditions that are more commonly in men. So we'll give you this one. Now, there are many theories or thoughts of what causes us to have a specific phobia. The first cause or theory is that it's biological. Maybe that it's an evolutionary thing, an adaptive behavior, or it's instinctual. So a good example of this is probably like snakes. We know that there are venomous and non-venomous snakes. And so it could be instinctual, meaning we want to avoid snakes because if a venomous snake bites us, we have the potential of dying. So maybe our instinct is to avoid them. That's just kind of going along with that theory. Another cause or theory is the social theory. So this is, I guess, kind of like peer pressure, but in a different way. If someone else is afraid of that activity, object, or thing, and so it impacts you to where you are. So for example, if your mother is deathly afraid of rats, and growing up all you hear about is that rats carry diseases and that they're unsanitary and they don't contribute at all to any type of environmental thing and they're just disgusting, a number of other things. And so then your mother's fear becomes your fear. Now the last one, and this is not really so much a theory, this is more of a causation, is classical conditioning, which we'll talk about more in depth in a later episode. But classic conditioning is you're pretty much trained into something. That's a short definition of it. When it comes to phobias, it's like if you have a traumatic experience. So if you have a traumatic experience with dogs and now you're terrified of dogs, that's an example. So earlier I mentioned that I have a phobia. And no, it's not like diagnosed, but most of those that are close to me, they know what this is. And so I figured if we're going to do an episode about phobias, why not share my own quote unquote traumatic experience that led to my fear. Now, I will say it's embarrassing. I think it's embarrassing what I'm afraid of because this animal, I will say it's an animal at first. I'll give you a few hints here before I tell you what it is. These are found everywhere all over the world, and they are not poisonous at all. However, only in Brazil. There are two types of this animal, two types of species of this animal that are poisonous, but they're only found in Brazil. And I will probably never go to Brazil. So me actually encountering one of these that can actually kill me is chances are slim to none there. So let me share the story here. Growing up, we had a pool in the backyard. And every summer we would swim. We would have such a great time. And these little things would hang out in the pool or the side of the pool. And so my wonderful mother, who I love very much, decided one time to pick up this amphibian placed at the top of my head, and I freaked out when it leaped off of my head. And then another time she decided to pick up this frog and throw it at me, and I just flipped out. And at that point she knew, oh, okay, she's really afraid of these things. Probably shouldn't tease her. And so it kind of got worse because my siblings, I mean, you know how siblings are. They really took my phobia and really teased me as much as they could with this. One of my siblings in particular, I'm not going to mention any names, Taylor, particularly liked to tease me. Anytime we're in the pool and there was a frog, oh, she was going to pick it up and grab it. And she was either going to throw it at me or act like she was going to throw it at me. And no, I would book it out of the pool. I'm running inside. I'm crying. I'm screaming. No. I do not do frogs. If you love frogs, if you think they're cute, good on you. But no bueno. I don't do them. Not at all. No. And so this phobia has turned into a big joke in my family, and I love my family. It is important to note that we do have a saying in our family, and it's, if you are not picked on, then you are not loved. And let me tell you, we are very loved. We love each other very much. So much so that if anything funny goes down throughout the year, you're going to get reminded at Christmas time and get some type of gag gift. Well, when it comes to frogs, every year, I can expect on a birthday or Christmas time or a special occasion that I'm going to get some type of gift with a frog on it. And it's all in good fun. I totally embrace it. It's whatever. One time, my sister Taylor, the one who teased me the most, she did a ceramic class and she made a frog. And, she gave it to me as a gift to put in my home. So things like that. I have, I think, these really cute and comfortable fluffy slippers with frogs on them. I have pajamas, shirts. I mean, things throughout the years that I could tell you. I probably can't tell you the long list of things that I've received. So all in good fun. Another note is, if I see a frog in person, it's not a big deal. If I see pictures of them, not a big deal. But the moment I see it in person and that thing moves, jumps, leaps, nope, I'm screaming like a little girl and running away. I will burn down my house. It's no bueno. No frogs, no. So, anyway, that is my story with phobias. So don't feel alone if you're embarrassed about yours, because mine's pretty silly. Mine would be under the umbrella of classical conditioning or having a quote-unquote traumatic experience with it, which created the phobia. So the next type of phobia is social phobia or social anxiety disorder. Which, right now, starting this podcast, playing back my voice, wondering what you're all going to think, gives me a little bit of social anxiety, I'm not going to lie. Yeah. I feel like most of us experience a lot of these conditions, but we're just not diagnosed with them because it doesn't interfere with our lives so much so that we have to really get help for it. Social anxiety disorder is a fear of one or more social performance situations in which embarrassment may occur and in which there is exposure to unfamiliar people or scrutiny by others. So some symptoms include fears. So the fear of being judged, embarrassed, or humiliated. Fear of strangers, that others will notice that you look anxious, or physical symptoms that people might notice. Now, the behaviors is maybe avoid speaking to others or being the center of attention, analyzing your social performance after the fact. Now, the physical symptoms include blushing, trembling, sweating, fast heartbeat, nausea, breathlessness, dizziness, blank mind, muscle tension. People with this condition, or maybe you have a little bit of this. Like I said, I feel like a lot of us probably experience some type of social anxiety, but others have it to the extreme. And this could be say you're invited to a birthday party and you know that there's going to be a lot of strangers there. This would become a maladaptive type thing to where you just decide not to go because you don't want to face being around a bunch of strangers. That's a good example of maladaptive. Whereas, normally be like, okay, there's going to be a lot of strangers, but I'm still going to go and you end up going and, you kind of get over those jitters and then you become fine. So that's kind of like the difference between it interfering and not interfering. Now, some numbers here. About 7% of the US population is actually diagnosed with a social anxiety disorder. A lot of these conditions and disorders, I love examples, and so I will post them after this episode publishes. Because for me, I think it's important that you see what I'm talking about instead of just hearing my voice explain these things. And so the first example that I have, this is for social anxiety disorder, is the movie Princess Diaries. And if you remember in that first movie, Mia, or later, Princess Mia, she has severe stage fright. And she's in her debate class. And she's up there talking about uniforms and why they should have school uniforms. And her class is kind of mocking her because they know that she has stage fright, which that probably makes her condition even worse. And when you watch the video, you'll see the physical symptoms that she has. She's kind of blushing, trembling, sweating, has a lot of breathlessness. And then she actually ends up becoming nauseous and end up fleeing the room because she's about to vomit. So that would kind of be an extreme social phobia. That would be more of a maladaptive thing. Whereas most of us, if we get stage fright, we have those jitters. Then we get up on stage and we're fine. So that's kind of the difference between it being a condition that should be diagnosed versus not. Or at least treated, I guess, or like needing start of treatment to help. Now, this last phobia is called agoraphobia, which aren't some of these words for phobia so interesting? Just scatophobia for like the number 13, claustrophobia. There's so many, but pretty much what they do is they take a Latin word that is commonly known as the root word so that everyone pretty much kind of understands at least a little bit of where that word comes from and what it means. Anyway, I digress. So, agoraphobia is a condition in which intense anxiety symptoms are experienced so much that the person avoids going to or even thinking about going to places or put in situations that bring up feelings of hopelessness, embarrassment, or a sense of being threatened. Now, this is about 2% of the US population. Now, I do have an example for this one, and the show that I'm going to use for the example I will use a lot in this podcast, only because the show has so many different examples of different disorders throughout the series. Now, this show is called Shameless, and I will let you know that it is very vulgar, so if you're not into that sort of thing, don't watch it at all. That's on you. The clips that I will post from it, I'll try to keep out anything like that. But I believe it's in season 4, there's this woman named Sheila, and she has agoraphobia really bad. And the clip I'm going to show, it's about 6 minutes long, and it kind of shows you her journey of her phobia. It gives you really good examples of kind of what this looks like. And then also in that clip shows you one of the type of therapies that we're going to cover here in a little bit. But I'll go over that once we get to it. Now, they say that the causes of agoraphobia is all cognitive. It's having irrational thought patterns. So maybe negative social beliefs and negative beliefs of themselves, and having an increased anxiety in social situations. Therapies, that's the next thing we're going to talk about. Things that they usually use to help with treatment for these conditions. No, these therapies go with all 3 of these, and I'll give you some examples here. Now, the therapy, it's called exposure therapy, and so this treats anxieties, just like it says, by exposing people to things they fear and avoid. Now, there are 3 ways of doing exposure therapies, which we're going to go over. The first one is called systematic desensitization. So this is taking a fear response to an object and replacing it with a relaxing response or a relaxing object. Now, I do have a clip on this one, and it's this woman that is terrified of clowns. And so in this clip, you'll see that her therapist, at first, he has little dolls of different clowns, and she reacts, yeah, that one's not bad, that one's not bad, that's not bad. And, he kind of increases it to kind of see where she's at fear-wise. And then there's a part where there's a book, and she's like deathly afraid of it. And, he kind of talks her into relaxing a little bit. And then later in the video, he actually gets her to go into a room with a bunch of her friends and family and has a clown come in. Now, he does tell her this is going to happen. It's not like completely caught by surprise. But he says, we're going to bring a clown in. So this clown comes in, and this poor woman is petrified. She's crying. It's really sad to watch, like how afraid. And this clown's very friendly. He's showing them all to make balloon animals. But, you see in the video how petrified she is, and then she eventually kind of starts to relax a little bit. So that's just a good example of this type of treatment that is used. Now, the next type of exposure therapy is virtual reality, which is just like it says. And in the Shameless clip with Sheila, this is the one that I'm talking about. You'll see her using virtual reality as treatment. And then the last one is a technique that they like to call flooding. Now, flooding is immediately exposure to the fear. Hello, fear factor. However, fear factor really isn't the best example of this because even though they immediately expose people to fear, they're not using it as a treatment. I also have a clip on this one, and it is about this guy named Marvin, and he is deathly afraid of pit bulls. And let me tell you, this poor guy, he avoids going to parks just because he knows that there is a potential for pit bulls to be there. Like for him, it's really bad. And the backstory is when he was around the age of 6, he was attacked by a pit bull. So he was classically conditioned, meaning, like I said, he had a traumatic experience with a pit bull. And so now he's terrified of them. Now, this technique in the clip is used because they take him to a park and they bring this lady that has a pit bull puppy and they have her walk closer and closer with the puppy. And you see poor Marvin just experiencing the trauma all over again the closer the dog gets. And eventually, he leans down to pet the puppy. And it just really comes to show that, he's taking the steps for treatment to overcome this phobia. So my heart goes out to him. And it's funny because you look at Marvin and he's all tatted up and looks like a tough guy. And he even says in the video that, he thinks he's a coward. And his therapist is like, you're not a coward. You experienced something traumatic at the age of 6 and you haven't overcome it and you're taking the steps to overcome it. And that does not make you a coward. So anyone with any type of phobia, if you think that when you confront it or you see it and you're scared, you're not a coward. Like there's reasons why, like I explained earlier, why we have phobias. Now, I just want to pose another question to you guys before we wrap up. Do all traumatic experiences lead to phobias? I don't quite think so because I have my own experience very similar to Marvin's actually. When I was 5 years old, my grandparents had a Saint Bernard named Stanley, and he was the sweetest dog ever. He really was. But he was getting up in his age, he was blind, and he was starting to be more aggressive. And we were about to go swimming, which is kind of funny because of my other phobia. Anyway, we were about to go swimming and I was outside playing, hanging around Stanley, and he bit me. And I kind of remember it, but not really, like just tidbits of what happened. My mom and my grandparents rushed me to the hospital. What I do remember is laying in the hospital bed, squeezing the crap out of my grandfather's hand because of the pain and because they were stitching me up. I had to get 13 stitches, I believe, and I still have a scar to this day on my shoulder. I was really mad after the fact because we went to where we were going to swim at our uncle's place and I couldn't swim. I wasn't allowed to swim because of the stitches. And I just remember being upset because I couldn't swim. And then, of course, my cousins were teasing me because I couldn't get in the pool. And then another thing I remember is when my mom took the stitches out at my grandparents', I was sitting on the countertop and my cousin and my sister were running around playing tag or hide and go seek, and I was upset because I couldn't play because I was getting my stitches out. Now, I will say I do remember being afraid of bigger dogs when I was younger, but around the time I was, I think, in middle school or high school, I just kind of overcame that fear myself. Like, I was always okay around smaller dogs. Big dogs, it was a little bit iffy, especially if they would try to jump on me. But I overcame it, and I don't even think it was really any of these therapies. It was just, I guess, me being exposed to bigger animals and learning that it was okay. So, I don't know. Maybe think about it and let me know what you think. If you have any ideas, if you want to share your phobia, you can totally do that. You can find us on Facebook at WT Psychology, on Instagram at What the Psychology. You can send us a tweet at WT Psychology. Send us an email at wtpsychology@gmail.com. We are on all major podcast streaming platforms, but our host platform is Anchor, so you can find us on anchor.fm/WT Psychology. So, what are you afraid of? Is it spiders and creepy crawling things? Rats? Maybe it's snakes? Clowns? Small spaces? Tall spaces? Frogs? Maybe, maybe not. Probably not. I mean, if you are afraid of frogs, I'm not going to say that would be great, but it would be, because then we can share our fear together. And I can send you some cute, fuzzy pajamas with frogs on them, and you can do the same, right? So let me know. You can always reach out. Let me know how this went, what you think, what you want to learn about. I'm open to anything. I kind of have a plan of the next few episodes, but I want to hear from you guys. I want to know what you want to know about. That's the whole point of this. It's for me to learn, for you to learn, us to get some information, us to get to know each other, us to dive into the human mind a bit and ask questions. And maybe solve them, maybe not. But we can definitely learn from each other, right? Welcome to the What the Psychology family. I'm so glad that you tuned in. I hope that you continue to listen, and I will see you next time. I am your host, Katie Gonzalez, and you've been listening to What the Psychology. Stay psyched, y'all.